Anwar Ibrahim is back in Malaysia's parliament. The voters of Pematang Pau sending him to KL with a convincing majority after 10 years of political exile. Anwar is vowing to take over the prime ministership by September the 16th and introduce sweeping reforms to government. But his political comeback may yet be derailed. He could still end up in jail thanks to criminal charges of sodomy brought against him. And the coalition that is promising to back him is already looking shaky. I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, I speak to Anwar Ibrahim and ask how and why does he plan to change 50 years of political consensus in Malaysia. Less than 10 years ago, Anwar Ibrahim was staring at four prison walls, a beaten man politically and physically. Today, he's a newly elected member of parliament with the cries of his supporters still ringing in his ears. Chantao Cho now reports on the wilderness years and the political comeback of Anwar Ibrahim.
Anwar Ibrahim is back. A by-election win in his hometown Pematang Pau of Penang State saw Anwar secure 2/3 of the vote over his opponent from Barisan Nasional, Malaysia's ruling coalition.
Well, with Anwar elected and coming into parliament as a parliamentary opposition leader, the Barisan Nasional having to face up to a more cohesive Pakatan Rakyat.
Pakatan Rakyat is the opposition alliance led by Anwar Ibrahim. He wants to topple the federal government by getting 30 of its members of parliament to defect by September 16th. If he succeeds, he will be Malaysia's next prime minister. It's an ambition met with cynicism by many in the government.
Well, I think first of all, the BN would know our MPs better than Anwar. Secondly, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. 16th of September, if it doesn't happen, what's going to happen then? Because as far as I'm concerned, as far as the world is concerned, 16th of September defines Anwar Ibrahim. If he doesn't become prime minister, he's finished.
Finished. That was how many saw Anwar Ibrahim 10 years ago. Then Malaysia's deputy prime minister, he was expected to succeed his mentor Mahathir Mohamad as premier. But police arrested him on charges of corruption and sodomy. After 5 years in jail, Anwar Ibrahim was banned from politics until April this year. During his incarceration, his wife Wan Aziza Ismail formed the People's Justice Party, or PKR. She won his seat in Pematang Pau, resigning only weeks ago to force a by-election that her husband could contest. But his comeback began much earlier. Anwar has been campaigning for the opposition over the past year, consistently warning the government that change was on the way.
Politics in Malaysia is not going to be the same anymore. They cannot take things for granted, and they know that we mean business, and that people, I can see people are even enraged.
During the general elections this March, Barisan Nasional suffered an unprecedented setback, failing to secure a 2/3 majority in parliament for the first time since independence. But despite its strong showing, Anwar Ibrahim's opposition alliance is already showing signs of fracture.
The AP is secular and the Islamic Party espouses a theocratic state. And left to their own devices together, there's no way that these two parties are going to come together. And Anwar is just keeping them together with the promise of power.
Another challenge for Anwar Ibrahim is the threat of another jail term. He has been charged with sodomizing his personal aide, an allegation he claims is politically motivated.
It is quite sure with his victory, most Malaysians are not convinced, or they do not care that if he is guilty of that charge. They would believe that this is a political fabrication, and that would leave the government in a very difficult position.
At the age of 61, Anwar Ibrahim can ill afford another political death. But whether the voters of Pematang Pau reflect the views of the rest of Malaysia remains to be seen.
First of all, congratulations on your election, your re-election.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you to the people of Malaysia. They have decided, and a very brave, very courageous decision against all odds.
You say against all odds. I mean, in retrospect, it almost seems as if it was obvious that you were going to win. But speaking to a number of members of your entourage on election eve, there did seem to be a certain sense of worry, not panic, but just a bit of concern. Were you feeling concerned that perhaps something might go wrong?
Yeah, the list provided for by the Election Commission was not the gazetted official list. It's an updated list. Many of our voters were missing. Then the presence of phantom voters. I myself encountered 2 bus loads of people from Malacca. So of course, naturally, our supporters are very worried. Given a fair, free elections, we will sail through.
It was, in the end, a fairly comfortable victory. Just describe, if you can, how it's been and how you feel right now at the end of this process.
One word, great. Because unlike previous elections, the debate by the ruling party is at least touching on issues of national unity, economic development. But this time, just a personal, malicious, scurrilous attack on my personality and inciting racial sentiments or even religious sentiments, agent of virtually everybody else, of the Americans, of the Jews, of the Chinese, of the Indians, which I thought was actually damaging for the country. So this is a referendum, actually. It may be a by-election, but a referendum, whether you endorse the government or you don't.
So your victory was interesting because your constituency is in fact majority Malay and a fair reflection of the makeup of the country as a whole racially. So do you think that the government now will look at this and go, okay, we now realize we don't have the support that we were hoping for?
Well, in any democratic country, you would expect the leadership to be mindful of this and respond accordingly. But from what we gather, the responses from the leaders is that, well, this is just a small by-election, which means nothing happens and nothing is expected to be done to change the course. It is important that in the past they say that only the non-Malays tend to, or non-Muslims tend to be more supportive of a change agenda. But this time around they saw the predominant Malay Muslim support for our position against the ruling party.
But surely it's too early still to call this victory. The ruling party are going to come after you again, aren't they?
Yes, I mean there's still this preferred charge against me. There is talk about all sort of issues and probably pending arrest. I don't know, but we'll face them head on. We have seen this enormous support since March general elections. Nothing has changed. In fact, things have improved as far as we're concerned. They had always sold the idea that the elections was one-off, I mean just a reaction to the probably economic problems being encountered, and that people, particularly the Malays, will flock back to the UMNO. Now they have seen that this is not happening.
So do you think that means that the sodomy case against you will now be dropped? Do you think they will pursue it with the same vigor?
If they choose to pursue it, we'll fight them all because they have no evidence at all. We have the alibi, they don't have any evidence to proceed. I mean, just is a malicious propaganda. They know it, they've crafted in such a manner, and so it's done in a very dubious manner.
Well, while those things may be true, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't make it stick, does it?
Oh yes, they have done that before. They can always repeat that. After all, they're used to that sort of I mean, they can decide which judge should sit and decide the conviction beforehand. But it's not going to be easy this round because people have learned their lesson, and we are much stronger now. We are in control of 5 states, including with federal territory, and we have a strong presence in Parliament. We will make their life miserable.
Just finishing off as a general conception, do you think that this victory says much for Malaysia? At the victory rally yesterday, a lot of people were saying this day will go down in history. But at the end of the day, you are simply a member of Parliament.
You see, the entire country is focused on that elections. The entire cabinet virtually sat there for the 10 days. And well, they can safely say where the entire political opposition party leadership were also there. Yes, that is why people generally believe that this is a defining moment in our history, because pursuing that 8th March election results, we have seen, and the issues in the debate, we say it must be the issue of unity, economic reform agenda, strengthening institutions of governance, including democracy and freedom. That's been our line.
Right.
That is why the motto, the popular motto, was Merdeka, independence. Can you imagine, after 51 years of independence, people want independence from an oppressive system with draconian laws?
Well, the solutions that you have proposed, some say, are going to be even tougher to achieve than the obstacles that you've had to overcome in the past 10 years. We'll get into exactly what it is you're proposing to and how you're proposing to